The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Buckingham Palace as Captain James Mitchell adjusted his ceremonial red tunic for the third time that hour. 20 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him to read the subtle signs that preceded palace drama, and today every instinct screamed that trouble was brewing. The palace buzzed with unusual energy. Kitchen staff whispered in hushed tones as they prepared breakfast trays, and even the usually stoic footmen seemed on edge. James had witnessed many royal transitions during his career, but nothing quite like this. Queen Catherine, once known simply as Kate Middleton, had ascended to the throne following an unexpected turn of events that had shocked the nation just 6 months prior. The former queen consort Camilla now held a different position in the royal hierarchy, one that many believed she struggled to accept gracefully. James had observed the tension building over recent weeks. Small incidents that individually seemed insignificant, but together painted a concerning picture of growing discord within the royal household. As James made his rounds through the East Wing, he encountered Lady Margaret Thornfield, the Queen's private secretary, hurrying down the corridor with an expression of barely contained anxiety. Her usually perfect composure had cracked, revealing the stress that had been building behind palace walls. "Captain Mitchell," she called softly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Her Majesty has requested your presence in the blue drawing room at 10 o'clock sharp. There's to be a formal tea service with several members of the family." James nodded curtly, understanding the unspoken message. When the Queen specifically requested his presence at family gatherings, it usually meant she anticipated the need for his particular brand of diplomatic intervention. His role extended far beyond the ceremonial duties most people associated with the Queen's Guard. He was a keeper of protocol, a silent enforcer of royal etiquette, and when necessary, a bridge between conflicting personalities within the royal household. The blue drawing room had been carefully prepared for the afternoon's gathering. Fine china gleamed on polished silver trays, and fresh flowers from the palace gardens filled crystal vases positioned strategically around the elegant space. James positioned himself near the main entrance, his practiced eyes scanning every detail to ensure everything met the exacting standards expected for a royal tea service. Queen Catherine entered first, her bearing regal yet approachable. Even after 6 months on the throne, James marveled at how naturally she had adapted to her new role. The shy young woman who had once captured Prince William's heart had evolved into a monarch who commanded respect through quiet dignity rather than imperious demands. She wore a navy blue dress that struck the perfect balance between formality and warmth, her signature sapphire and diamond earrings catching the afternoon light. As she took her seat at the head of the arrangement, James noticed how she positioned herself to face the door, a subtle but telling choice that would allow her to observe everyone who entered. Prince William arrived next, his face carrying the weight of recent family tensions. As heir apparent, he walked a delicate line between supporting his wife in her new role and maintaining relationships with other family members who had their own claims to royal tradition. James had served William for years and could read the prince's mood in the set of his shoulders and the measured pace of his walk. The younger royals followed in carefully orchestrated succession. Princess Anne entered with her characteristic no-nonsense demeanor, offering a respectful curtsy to Queen Catherine that spoke volumes about her acceptance of the new order. The Earl and Countess of Wessex arrived together, their united front suggesting they had discussed their approach to this delicate family gathering beforehand. James maintained his position by the door, his trained gaze moving constantly between the arriving family members and the staff who moved silently around the room, ensuring tea service proceeded flawlessly. Years of experience had taught him that the most significant moments often occurred during these seemingly routine family gatherings. When guards were down, and true feelings surfaced beneath the veneer of royal protocol, the atmosphere in the room grew noticeably tenser as they waited for the final guest. Conversations that had been flowing naturally began to stilted, and James noticed how Queen Catherine's fingers drummed almost imperceptibly against her teacup, the only outward sign of her internal tension. When Camilla finally appeared in the doorway, the change in the room's energy was immediate and palpable. She paused dramatically at the threshold, her entrance clearly calculated for maximum impact. Her choice of attire seemed deliberately provocative for the occasion, a deep burgundy dress that spoke of authority and a hat that added unnecessary formality to what was meant to be an intimate family gathering. James watched carefully as Camilla surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on each family member before finally settling on Queen Catherine. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone waited for the traditional acknowledgement of the sovereign's presence. Royal protocol was crystal clear on this matter. Every person, regardless of their previous rank or relationship to the crown, was expected to show proper respect to the reigning monarch. The curtsy, a gesture so fundamental to royal etiquette that it was performed automatically by seasoned royals, failed to materialize. Instead, Camilla moved toward an empty chair with deliberate casualness, her bearing suggesting she considered herself exempt from the protocols that governed everyone else in the room. James felt his jaw tighten imperceptibly. In his 2 decades of service, he had never witnessed such a blatant disregard for royal protocol within the family itself. The implications went far beyond simple rudeness. This was a direct challenge to Queen Catherine's authority and, by extension, to the stability of the monarchy itself. Queen Catherine's response was masterful in its restraint. Rather than immediately addressing the breach of protocol, she continued with the tea service as if nothing unusual had occurred. Her voice remained steady as she inquired about Camilla's recent activities. But James could see the subtle tension in her posture that indicated her keen awareness of the situation. The other family members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their discomfort with the unfolding drama. Prince William's face had darkened considerably, his loyalty to his wife warring with his desire to avoid public family conflict. Princess Anne's expression had shifted from neutral observation to barely concealed disapproval, her own strict adherence to protocol making Camilla's behavior particularly galling. As the tea service continued, James found himself in an impossible position. Royal guards were trained to be invisible observers, present but not participatory in family dynamics. However, his duty to protect royal protocol and maintain the dignity of the crown demanded action when that protocol was so flagrantly violated. The conversation around the tea table grew increasingly strained as Camilla continued to behave as if she were the senior royal present. She directed comments and questions in a manner that suggested she expected others to defer to her judgment, apparently oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the fact that Queen Catherine now held the highest position in the royal hierarchy. James watched as Queen Catherine navigated each conversational trap with diplomatic skill, neither rising to obvious bait nor allowing herself to be diminished by Camilla's behavior. The Queen's grace under pressure impressed him immensely, but he also recognized that her restraint could not continue indefinitely without appearing weak to other family members. When Camilla made a particularly pointed comment about traditional ways of doing things, while looking directly at Queen Catherine, the tension in the room reached a breaking point. James saw Prince William's hands clench into fists beneath the table, and noticed how Princess Anne's teacup rattled slightly as she set it down with more force than necessary. The moment had arrived when James knew he could no longer remain a silent observer. The breach of protocol was not only ongoing but escalating, and his oath to protect the dignity of the crown demanded intervention. As the senior guard present, he had both the authority and the responsibility to address situations that threatened royal protocol and family harmony. James stepped forward from his position by the door, his movement immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The conversation ceased abruptly, as all eyes turned to him, each family member understanding that guards only interrupted royal gatherings under extraordinary circumstances. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of 2 decades of unwavering service to the crown and absolute certainty in the righteousness of his position. "Your pardon, Your Majesty," James said, his voice cutting through the thick silence like a blade. He executed a perfect bow toward Queen Catherine, demonstrating the proper protocol that had been so conspicuously absent from their gathering. "I believe there has been an oversight in the observance of royal protocol." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and James could feel the collective intake of breath from everyone present. Camilla's face flushed a deep red that clashed dramatically with her burgundy dress, her eyes flashing with indignation at being called out by someone she clearly considered beneath her station. "Captain Mitchell," Queen Catherine said carefully, her tone neutral but her eyes betraying a flicker of gratitude. "Please elaborate on your concern." James straightened to his full height, his bearing radiating the confidence that came from absolute certainty in royal protocol and his duty to uphold it. "Your Majesty, It is my sworn duty to ensure that all proper respects are paid to the crown in every circumstance. Royal protocol clearly dictates that all persons, without exception, must acknowledge the sovereign with appropriate reverence upon entering the royal presence. The directness of his statement left no room for misinterpretation. Every person in the room understood exactly what he was addressing, and more importantly, they understood that he was within his rights and duties to address it. Camilla's face had progressed from red to white, her composure cracking under the weight of public correction. "How dare you," Camilla began, her voice trembling with rage, "presume to lecture me about protocol? I have been part of this family longer than—" "Ma'am," James interrupted with respectful firmness, using the formal address that acknowledged her position while firmly establishing the hierarchy. "Length of family association does not supersede the requirements of royal protocol. Every person who enters the presence of the reigning sovereign is required to demonstrate proper respect, regardless of their personal history or previous relationships." Prince William shifted uncomfortably in his seat, caught between his loyalty to his wife and his desire to avoid a family explosion. His position as heir apparent made his silence particularly significant. By not defending Camilla, he was tacitly supporting the guard's intervention. Princess Anne, however, had no such qualms about making her position clear. "Captain Mitchell is absolutely correct," she said with characteristic bluntness. "Protocol exists for good reason, and it applies to everyone equally. Personal feelings or past relationships are irrelevant when it comes to showing proper respect to the crown." Her words carried particular weight given her reputation for strict adherence to royal traditions and her own impeccable record of protocol observance. When Princess Anne spoke on matters of royal etiquette, even the most rebellious family members typically listened. Camilla's composure finally shattered completely. "This is preposterous," she exclaimed, her voice rising to a pitch that would have been considered unseemly in any royal gathering. "I have served this family faithfully for years, endured public scrutiny and criticism, supported the monarchy through difficult times, and now I'm being subjected to lectures from palace staff about how to behave in my own family home?" The irony of her outburst was lost on no one present. By losing her temper so dramatically, she was proving exactly why protocol existed in the first place: to maintain dignity and order in all circumstances, especially during moments of tension or disagreement. James remained unmoved by her emotional display, his training having prepared him for exactly such situations. "Ma'am," he said with unwavering calm, "this is not about past service or family relationships. This is about the fundamental respect owed to the sovereign, which forms the foundation of our constitutional monarchy. Without that respect, properly and consistently demonstrated, the entire system becomes vulnerable to chaos and disrespect." Queen Catherine finally spoke, her voice carrying a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. "Captain Mitchell raises valid points about protocol that merit serious consideration," she said, her diplomatic language masking what everyone understood to be firm support for the guard's position. "Perhaps we should take this opportunity to clarify expectations going forward, ensuring that all family gatherings proceed with the dignity and respect that the monarchy deserves." The subtle rebuke was delivered with such grace that it took several seconds for its full impact to register. Queen Catherine had not only supported the guard's intervention but had used it as an opportunity to establish clear boundaries for future interactions. Camilla looked around the room desperately, seeking support from other family members, but found only uncomfortable silence or outright disapproval. The Earl of Wessex studied his teacup with intense concentration, while the Countess appeared to be fascinated by the flower arrangements. Even the staff members, normally invisible during family gatherings, seemed to have found urgent tasks that required their immediate attention elsewhere in the room. "I will not be humiliated in this manner," Camilla declared, rising from her chair with such force that her teacup rattled dangerously on its saucer. "This entire situation is beneath my dignity and unworthy of my continued presence." James watched her dramatic exit preparation with professional detachment, noting how her behavior continued to validate his original intervention. A truly dignified response would have involved acknowledging the protocol error and correcting it gracefully, not storming out like a petulant child denied a favorite toy. "Ma'am," he said quietly as Camilla gathered her belongings, "the requirement for proper protocol acknowledgement remains unchanged, regardless of when it is observed. The respect owed to Her Majesty is not diminished by delay, but it is not eliminated by avoidance either. His words stopped Camilla mid-stride, the implications clear to everyone present. She could leave the gathering, but she could not leave the relationship or the family, and eventually she would need to address the protocol issue properly or face continued awkwardness in all future royal gatherings. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone waited to see how Camilla would respond to this final challenge. Her face cycled through multiple emotions: rage, embarrassment, calculation, and finally, a grudging recognition that she had painted herself into a corner with no graceful exit. Queen Catherine maintained perfect composure throughout this internal struggle, her expression neutral but watchful. She understood that this moment would set important precedents for all future family interactions, and that the outcome would either strengthen or undermine her authority as sovereign. Prince William finally broke his silence, his voice carefully modulated to avoid inflaming the situation further. "Perhaps," he suggested diplomatically, "we might all benefit from a brief recess to collect our thoughts before continuing our gathering." It was a face-saving gesture that offered everyone an opportunity to reset the dynamic without requiring anyone to concede defeat publicly. However, it also placed the burden squarely on Camilla to decide whether she would return to the gathering, prepared to observe proper protocol, or continue her defiant stance. James remained at attention, his duty clear regardless of how the family chose to proceed. He had intervened when protocol was violated, supported his sovereign when her authority was challenged, and maintained the dignity of the crown even in the face of family drama. Whatever happened next, he had fulfilled his obligations faithfully and without compromise. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for Camilla's response to the prince's diplomatic suggestion. Her next words would determine whether this confrontation escalated into a permanent family rift or resolved into an uncomfortable but manageable lesson in royal hierarchy and protocol observance. Camilla stood frozen in the center of the blue drawing room, her internal struggle visible in the tension of her shoulders and the white-knuckled grip she maintained on her handbag. The silence stretched on, broken only by the gentle ticking of the ornate mantel clock and the distant sounds of palace life continuing beyond the closed doors. James observed her carefully, his experienced eye reading the subtle signs that indicated which way her decision might fall. 20 years of service had taught him to recognize the moments when pride warred with practicality, when personal feelings battled against institutional necessity. This was clearly one of those pivotal moments that would reshape family dynamics for years to come. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Camilla slowly turned back toward the seating arrangement. Her movements were deliberate and measured, each step clearly calculated as she wrestled with the humiliation of having to acknowledge her error publicly, while simultaneously recognizing the impossibility of her current position. "Your Majesty," she said finally, her voice strained but audible, "I appear to have been remiss in my observance of proper protocol." The words seemed to physically pain her, but they represented a crucial first step toward resolution. James noted that while she had acknowledged the error, she had not yet corrected it through proper action. The verbal admission was necessary, but insufficient for true protocol compliance. Queen Catherine responded with the grace that had made her beloved by the British public throughout her years of royal service. "Thank you for that acknowledgement," she said warmly, her tone carrying no hint of triumph or vindictiveness. "We all occasionally need reminders about proper procedures, especially during times of transition and change." The generous response offered Camilla a pathway to save face while still requiring her to complete the protocol correction. It was masterful diplomacy that demonstrated exactly why Queen Catherine had proven so successful in her royal role. She understood how to be firm without being cruel, authoritative without being petty. James watched as Camilla processed this olive branch, clearly torn between gratitude for the gracious handling of her embarrassment and resentment at needing such grace in the first place. The next few seconds would reveal whether she possessed the wisdom to accept the offered dignity or would allow pride to sabotage her final opportunity for a respectful resolution. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Camilla began to lower herself into a curtsy. The movement was neither graceful nor enthusiastic, but it was genuine and properly executed according to royal protocol. As she bent her knees, and inclined her head in the traditional gesture of respect to the sovereign. The tension in the room finally began to dissipate. "Your Majesty," Camilla said as she completed the curtsy and straightened to her full height. "I hope you will accept my apologies for the oversight." Queen Catherine nodded graciously, her relief carefully concealed but undoubtedly significant. "Of course," she replied simply, allowing the matter to close without further elaboration or drama. James felt a profound sense of satisfaction as he witnessed the successful resolution of what could have become a damaging family crisis. His intervention had been risky, challenging a senior family member, always carried the possibility of career-ending backlash, but his duty to protect royal protocol and support his sovereign had left him no choice. Prince William visibly relaxed for the first time since the confrontation began, his shoulders dropping as the immediate crisis passed. "Perhaps we should continue with our tea," he suggested, his tone carefully neutral, but with an underlying note of relief that the family gathering could proceed without permanent damage to relationships. As the conversation gradually resumed around the tea table, James noticed interesting dynamics emerging in the aftermath of the confrontation. Princess Anne's approval of his intervention was evident in the slight nod she gave him when their eyes met across the room. The Earl and Countess of Wessex seemed more relaxed now that the protocol issue had been resolved, their earlier discomfort replaced by normal family conversation rhythms. Most significantly, Queen Catherine appeared to have gained confidence from the successful handling of the challenge to her authority. Her posture was more assured, her voice carried greater authority, and her interactions with family members reflected the quiet strength that comes from knowing one's position is respected and secure. Camilla, for her part, seemed subdued but not broken. The humiliation of the public correction was clearly difficult for her to bear, but she appeared to be processing the lesson rather than simply nursing wounded pride. James hoped this incident would serve as a valuable learning experience rather than a source of ongoing resentment. As the formal tea service concluded and family members began to take their leave, each person approached Queen Catherine with proper protocol observance. The contrast with the earlier breach could not have been more stark, and James felt confident that the lesson had been learned by everyone present. When Princess Anne passed by James on her way out, she paused just long enough to murmur quietly, "Well done, Captain. The Crown is fortunate to have such dedicated protectors." Her words carried the weight of someone who understood both the difficulty and the necessity of his intervention. Prince William's farewell to James was equally meaningful, though more subtle. A firm handshake and direct eye contact conveyed his appreciation for the guard's support of his wife's authority, even though diplomatic necessity prevented him from expressing such gratitude more openly. As the last family member departed, and the staff began clearing away the tea service, James found himself alone with Queen Catherine for a brief moment. She approached him with the warm smile that had endeared her to millions of subjects worldwide. "Captain Mitchell," she said quietly, "I want you to know how much I appreciate your dedication to proper protocol and your support of the Crown's dignity. Today could have been much more difficult without your intervention." James bowed deeply, moved by her personal acknowledgement of his service. "Your Majesty, it was my honor and duty to serve. The Crown's dignity must be maintained regardless of personal relationships or family dynamics." Queen Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, it must. I hope that today's lesson will prevent future incidents of this nature, but I'm grateful to know that I can count on your continued vigilance and support." As James resumed his normal duties later that afternoon, he reflected on the day's events with professional satisfaction. The confrontation had been unpleasant but necessary, and its resolution had strengthened rather than weakened the royal family's internal structure. Most importantly, Queen Catherine's authority had been firmly established and properly respected by all family members. The incident would undoubtedly be discussed in palace corridors for days to come, but James was confident that the message had been clearly conveyed. Protocol was not optional. Respect for the sovereign was non-negotiable, and family relationships did not supersede constitutional requirements. In the weeks that followed, James observed positive changes in family dynamics during royal gatherings. Camilla's behavior became notably more correct and respectful, her earlier defiance replaced by proper acknowledgement of Queen Catherine's position. Other family members seemed more relaxed and comfortable, no longer walking on eggshells around potential protocol violations or awkward power struggles. Queen Catherine's confidence continued to grow as she settled more fully into her sovereign role. The successful handling of the confrontation had proven to herself and others that she possessed both the grace to offer forgiveness and the strength to demand respect when necessary. For James, the incident became a defining moment in his long career of royal service. He had faced a situation that tested every aspect of his training and judgment, and he had emerged with his principles intact and his duty fulfilled. The crown was stronger because of his intervention. The royal family was more unified, and protocol had been preserved for future generations. As he stood his evening watch outside the Queen's private apartments, James allowed himself a moment of quiet pride in a job well done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but today he had proven himself worthy of the trust placed in him by the Crown and the British people. In a world where so much seemed uncertain and changeable, the steady preservation of royal protocol and constitutional respect remained a cornerstone of national stability, and James was honored to play his part in maintaining those vital traditions.